it well. Played it very, very, very well indeed.
No more slices for you.
Oh, look at that for judgment.
You'll learn.
Right, it's episode 4 of Slice with me, Ben Coley, and Sam Harrop. Still working on how best to introduce episodes, but this is what we have. Sam, how was your week? That's what I've gone with.
My week, it was good. I mean, I had a nice weekend, I'll say. I met up with some friends that I don't see anything near enough of. And I played golf with a good friend of mine, beat him, which is great. I've shot one of my best ever rounds, even though 3 holes were closed. So it wasn't an official best round, but it felt like it was a best round. And then went out on Saturday night. I had a very big night. Didn't watch much of Torrey Pines because of that. But I did see Andrew Novak hold a very long putt while I was in the casino. So that was nice.
Wow, you mentioned you dropped the casino in there. I like that. That sounds like a pretty good weekend. I did something similar on Saturday. I saw some friends I met 20 years ago at university, so that's good.
Any casino action? Or?
No casino action, no. We took the kids, so that was we were out of there before the real party started, I suppose. But obviously there's a reason I asked you how your week was. I had a fantastic sort of... In one of the episodes so far, I mentioned that I'd been recognised a total of 2 times in the past. Well, it's officially 3. Although I wasn't necessarily recognised. I was talking to a parent in the playground and they introduced their brother and he said, "What do you do?" And I sports channel, blah, blah, blah. And I mentioned Sporting Life, and usually I go with my standard line of, you probably haven't heard of us unless you really like horse racing. Well, I do like horse racing. I know Sporting Life. And he said, do you know that Ben Cooley? I won't say the complimentary things he also said in that same sentence, like legend or so, I can't remember. I said, Ben Coley, yeah, that's me. And obviously I was quite embarrassed at this point. And then I offered to sign something, which made it all the more awkward. But he was very nice.
He asked for your autograph.
Say again, sorry.
He asked for your autograph.
He did not ask for my autograph. No, I mean, maybe he will. We want to go for a pint? No, me neither. No, yeah. I'm afraid we've clearly not cut through onto his podcast feed yet because he said, I've seen you in a podcast. I thought, blimey, we've already made it to the playground. And then he said, yeah, with that Sarah from Sky Sports. Are you talking about the Betfair podcast there, aren't you? Great podcast. A great podcast. But not my latest venture. But yeah, it was good. That was nice. He seemed friendly. But now it's that thing where, as I alluded to before, if things don't go so well with my tips, then I'm going to get that every Monday. Speaking of which, it was annoying to miss Harris English last week. We're not going to dwell on it. I'm going to hand over to you to, move us along because it was well done to Dave Tyndall, a friend of ours, and hopefully a stand-in host who did select Harris English. Commiserations to Niall Lyons, who very nearly selected Harris English. And well done to me for going with Rico Hoey instead at the same price. What a great decision that was.
Same price, wow. That's blown my mind.
Harris English was 80, 90 to 1. Yeah.
Well, I mean, going back to being recognised, so it has happened a couple of times with me, but I think the most entertaining one.
Let's face it. Let's be honest.
Well, I mean, I don't want to, don't want to blow my own trumpet now. It's been 3 times. I think we're tied now on 3, Ben. But the most entertaining one was a few weeks ago, a couple of months ago, when I was going to the Bournemouth Man City game with my son, and we were just on our way into the ground just outside the stadium. This guy comes running over. He says, "Are you the guy that does the golf songs?" And I was like, "Yes, I am." And then we had a nice little chat, and my son was sort of there, sort of, mouth agape, couldn't believe that I'd been recognised in the wild. So.
Surely he was more impressed that it was by Pep Guardiola. I bet he knows about it. He plays golf with Tommy Fleetwood. It all makes sense.
Pep, yeah. Sadly, it wasn't Pep, or it didn't look like him. But anyway, we'll move on to a review of the week's golf that's just gone. The Farmers, as I mentioned, I didn't see much of the final round. I mean, I was kind of missed golf being on the Sunday night, to be honest. It's kind of my Sunday night routine. It's sort of a quiet night in with the golf in front of me, and I was a bit sort of a loose end last night. But did you watch most of the last round?
I watched quite a bit of it. Yeah. No, I didn't get to the end. I didn't. It was very similar to Sepp Straka a couple of weeks before. I left it hoping not to open up the app in the morning and see that Harris English had won, and indeed he had. But there you go. He, that bit of experience, the fact that he, he's been there and done it before. And Andrew Novak, although he's been in contention a couple of times now and has turned into a really solid player. It's probably not a surprise that Harris won. I know Sam Stevens, I saw he had a really bad lip out, didn't he? On maybe the 12th hole. I think I put him up as my player to follow with you in your sort of give me a player to follow on the PGA Tour for the year. I think
outside
I said Sam Stevens. He finished second. Obviously, he hit it in the water on 18, which I'd sort of missed. So that I think if you backed him, and again, Niall was on him and not on Harry, he must have felt rotten. But there we go. Harris English, very impressive. He knows how to get it done. I remember. When Jordan Spieth sort of came out, it was obviously a couple of years after Harris English, and I think it was Bob Estes, someone of that, maybe Bryony Baird or someone, I don't know. I think it was Bob Estes said, everyone's obsessed over Jordan Spieth. You watch out for Harris English. This guy's going to win majors. And it's always stuck with me. He'd already won a couple of times by then. And obviously he's not won a major, but he's been pretty close, including famously at Torrey Pines. So it was always a course where you felt he could win. And who knows what it'll lead to. He's if he drives the ball better, it's always been that weakness, but I think if he drives the ball well, he's got everything else, hasn't he? So you wouldn't rule him out of putting a push towards a second Ryder Cup appearance.
No, absolutely not. And something I wanted to reference was obviously there's this sort of semi-viral tweet that went out over the weekend from Kyle Porter, who, really the point of the tweet, I suppose, was to talk about the fact that YouTube golf is searing in popularity, whereas tour golf, at least if you look at kind of the normal metrics, is maybe struggling somewhat. And his tweet, although I say it was pertaining more to the fact that that the tour is struggling. I'll try and find the tweet it would probably help. It basically alluded to the fact that Novak and Stevens being in the mix in a PGA Tour event. How is that for 400 minutes? How's that going to compare to people being able to dial into YouTube for 40 minutes and see some people play amazing golf courses? And it's an interesting point. But in terms of the players that he's mentioned, which obviously wasn't the point of the tweet, but for me, I'm quite happy to watch the lesser lights in the mix, especially if it's a close finish, like it was on Saturday. Obviously, I didn't watch much of it, as it happened because I was away. But ordinarily, if you get a tight finish like that, you've got whoever, it could be anyone in the mix, honestly. And especially, I think if they're looking for their first tour victory, in the case of Novak and Stevens, I find it pretty compelling.
Yeah, me too. And I think it's sort of unique to golf, actually, that, if you get a tennis final between players ranked further down, I'm sure if it's a Grand Slam, obviously people will still watch. But if that's a regular event and the big names haven't lived, it's very niche. And I think golf sometimes forgets that. Like we're in a little bubble, aren't we, on golf Twitter? Realistically, why should the Farmers Insurance Open resonate beyond people like you and I? And is that really the problem? And can you solve it? And certainly I wouldn't think you could solve it by just swapping. Had it been Ludwig versus Matsuyama, I'm sure the viewership would have been higher, but only because more people who have to decide what to do with their very precious time in a sport that runs pretty much 50 weeks a year. Like even people like me, I'm absolutely golf obsessive. I don't watch every single final round, and the determining factor could be, oh wow, well for me I've got a selection in the mix, but let's forget that. Like had it been Ludwig versus Hideki, then I'd be like, I'll make sure I watch this. It was Harris English against Stevens and Novak. I was tired after a day out with the family. I was happy to not watch it. But that's an existing golf fan. So I don't think it's really the same. We're talking about two different problems, right? And if we're talking about the growth of the sport and the battle for spare time, as I put it, with YouTube, then I don't know. I think it's a bit more complicated than that. And I think the sport has a shop window, which are the majors and the Ryder Cup. And in terms of growing it and getting more people interested, that's the window for me. It's like, try this Ryder Cup, look how compelling this is. And then if you fall for the game, these same people might go and hit some balls. They might think, oh, actually, that's going to be an option for me to watch on a Sunday night now. But I always come back to this. I don't think golf has a great ceiling for getting people to sit down and watch it at tour level unless you completely change what tour level golf is. So if we paid them less, right, which wouldn't be popular among anybody who is on the receiving end of that, but if we paid them less, we'd probably be a bit more realistic about and to some extent, that is kind of now baked in because last week's event was worth nowhere near as much as this week's event. So we should expect a smaller audience, right? It doesn't worry me too much. I don't know. I don't have any of the answers, I think, is what's clear from this rambling answer of my own.
No, well, I think the thing for me, and you sort of reference this really, is that the names that are in the mix in that type of event, I don't think make a huge difference, right?
No.
I mean, take the Tour Championship at the end of last year, for example. Obviously, it's a bigger event. There's bigger prize money, everything. There's more coverage. But, you got Scheffler going into the final round with a 5-shot lead over Morikawa. For me, I'm not thinking I need to watch that. I'm thinking Scheffler's almost certainly got this sewn up. And I think for me, there's, in my mind, and you may disagree with this, Ben, there are 3 players who are active on the PGA Tour, at least 2 of them are active, really, that move the needle to any meaningful extent. And they are Tiger Woods, obviously, who doesn't really play much nowadays, let's be honest. You've got Rory McIlroy, sort of universally loved, and people will tune in to watch him. And then, for me, the third is Jordan Spieth. I think he's someone who's compelling to watch when he's in contention. I think outside of that, I don't really think that anyone else is really going to move the needle. Your sort of Xanders, your Schefflers, Morikawas. That's my personal view.
Yeah, I think you're probably right. I mean, I'd be interested to see let's put McIlroy or Spieth in that position where they're 5 or 6 shots clear and see what that does to the numbers. I suppose would be the fairest way to assess that.
Yeah.
But I broadly agree with you. And coming back to the Farmers, there were only 2 players in that field really who could even come close to what you're saying. Really, Matsuyama and Ludwig. I like Sung Jae, Tony Finau, popular among golf fans. But I guess it's a matter of expectations. And don't get me wrong, there has to be a concern if numbers across the board are going down. That should be a concern for the PGA Tour. And I think arguably we just come back to slow play there, and if we could lose an hour off the time it takes, then that's going to help, and way more than had it been Finau in the mix on Sunday, right? Because there's just not that, as I've said, like part of the beauty for golf and golf fans is in the variety and in the fact that we're going to find out how Sam Stevens does in this situation, and the fact that it could be anybody at the start of the week. That should be a big part of the appeal, because I think if you take it the other way, and I don't suppose it has been a problem, but tennis was obviously spoiled for 15, 20 years of the same Grand Slam finals, effectively. And that's fine, because what you end up with is rivalry, and you end up with head-to-heads, and you end up with memorable matches where people say, remember the 2008 Wimbledon final. I don't know, I sold my tickets, but that's not the point. Remember the 2008 Wimbledon final, and so on and so forth. Golf's never going to have that, because you're never going to be able to call upon the majors, and that's basically it. No one is going. Do you remember when Mark Leishman held off John Rahm and Rory? I might remember it, but it's not going to transcend the sport. It's not. I don't know. We have to be more realistic about what a normal tour event is. Last week was a normal PGA Tour event, and there was a lot of hand-wringing about, TGL's ruined it all, these players withdrawn. Schauffele's injured, right? Schauffele is injured. Scotty Scheffler never plays Torrey Pines. Rory McIlroy's played it like once or twice. And all those, apart from Schauffele, who remains, by the way, injured, they're playing this week at Pebble Beach. And that emphasis on those big events, like, I have mixed feelings about signature events in general. There's some things about them I absolutely detest. But in terms of being able to say to people, right, this is when you tune in. If you're a potential lover of golf who's just beginning that, this is when you tune in. This is what we're going to market. That's this week. And hopefully we don't lose a round like we did last year, although it worked out well in the end for certain people. But
absolutely. I completely agree. And like you say, to mention the slow play thing is definitely pertinent as well in this. But moving on to
Pepper on that. I mean, Dottie Pepper in the middle of the broadcast called it out. Colton Oster's tweeted about it. You've got people who are working effectively subcontracted by the PGA Tour almost. They're putting potentially their jobs on the line. I know they're not really, but they're speaking out against something that they feel is a big problem from within, much easier than us doing it. It's much easier for us to do it. So fair play, and hopefully those voices are definitely getting louder. And
absolutely,
and that can only be a good thing.
Sarah Stirk as well on Instagram. Yeah, so there's definitely over the last, let's say, 7-10 days, there's definitely been a wave of kind of prominent people calling it out, which something has to happen. So we'll see. The Ras Al Khaimah, obviously Del Rey as a dominant display. It was it was impressive. It was another one where again, he sort of had it sewn up relatively early on, or you felt like he did.
Yeah, definitely. He was great. He was playing video games, Sam. There you go. Very good.
I was waiting for it. Excellent.
Yeah, he's a fabulous talent. He really is. One of, I think the three, as Pablo Larrazabal's called out, there were 3 or 4 Spaniards in the top 5 went there. And Larrazabal is, he can be a bit prickly. I like him. He's very passionate, and says what he thinks. And he pointed out, how many Danes do we have on that cup team, like 5 or 6, and no Spaniards. Now Del Rey hadn't done enough, but maybe Angel Hidalgo had, and that's something to consider. David Puig, given that Tyrrell Hatton played, theoretically could have been on the team, and what a player he's turning into. But yeah, Del Rey was brilliant. He had a bit of luck in round 3. I think he got. It's one of those courses, Alhambra, where, and I mentioned it before, that's why the big hitters have got the potential to do that. It's not Ryan Fox won by a mile. Nikolai Højgaard, I don't think he won by miles in the end, but he was very dominant. Basically, if you blast it off the tee and you get a bit of luck, it's a pretty good formula, and he was fantastic. And as with Angel Hidalgo last year, and as with first time winners from other countries as well, it'll be fascinating to see where he goes from here, because he drives it so far, and he's got a pretty tidy short game when it's on.
He's made that nice progression, hasn't he? Where he won on the Challenge Tour, didn't he? 2 seasons in a row, I think. Obviously, he earned his card. It's taken him a couple of seasons to get that win. You kind of felt like it was coming, but he's just been steadily progressing through the ranks. And yeah, where he goes from here, does he become a multiple tour winner this season? Does it take another couple of years? It'll be interesting to see. He's certainly an exciting player to watch. And I wanted to mention Joe Dean, because I think he's one of these stories. Obviously it's been covered to a certain extent last year, but I still think it's amazing his rise, because it's a year ago now. He was still doing deliveries for Morrison's, trying to basically pay his way for to travel to tournaments. Obviously, he came straight out of the blocks, and he got a top 5 in Kenya, and now he's got 6th. Last week was his 6th top 5 finish on the DP World Tour. He's up to 145th in the world. Over the space of 12 months, that is amazing.
It is a phenomenal story, isn't it? And he's got that handy knack, or he's had over the last 12 months, that handy knack of making it really pay, because he is quite up and down. But when he has really stuck around and has played some fantastic weekend golf, if you isolated weekend rounds, his numbers would be fantastic. So, it's a great story, and one of opportunity and, making it pay, and probably further demonstration of how thin the line is. Because there are people right now still delivering for Morrison's who are plus handicappers, aspiring tour pros. Maybe they're playing on the Clutch Tour this year, or the Alps Tour coming up, or whatever. And they'll look to Joe Dean and they'll think that could be me. That's no doubt they will. I can't remember who said it on the broadcast last week as well. Players seeing players that they've played. It might have been David Howe. Players that they play with at home and they can compete against. And that may happen with the Spaniards, for instance. Like now they've seen Del Rey. You could see a couple more of those come through, and it definitely, it's such a fine margin sport. Like the difference between, with a few exceptions, the difference between players who are threatening now the top 100 or the top 50, like Joe Dean, and those who are really considering whether to pack it all in. Who was it that was saying they considered packing it all? Yeah, Dylan Fratelli. The defending champion this week, when he won last year in Bahrain, he said that he had moments where he thought he might pack it all in. He probably slightly dramatic, given that he just come off the PGA Tour, but you get the point. It's a tough sport.
It is, and obviously, lastly on Joe Dean, he's probably the single person I've had the most song requests for. The number of people who've messaged me, so when are we getting the Joe Dean song? And I think the amount of requests I've had for that, I hate to think how much he gets. Joe Dean. Oh, he must get absolutely sick of it.
My mind went to Daniel Bedingfield, terrifyingly.
Wow,
because he had that song where he said I could be the James Dean. That's where Joe Dean would go, of the music scene. Didn't happen in the end. He was rubbish.
No, this was very much a more dated reference of Dolly Parton, but I think also probably the more successful song commercially.
I've also just had a horrible moment where I realised I think Daniel Bedingfield was in like a really bad car accident or something. So I take back, he was rubbish. Very talented. So was his sister. I couldn't resist slipping in an office line, but it was misplaced on this occasion.
And on to so we wanted to call out our finish of the week, didn't we, Ben? The SDC Open on the, I was going to say Challenge Tour. I was just had to bite my tongue there. Not the Challenge Tour, the Hotel Planner Tour.
Well done.
Co-sanctioned with the Sunshine Tour. And Daniel Van Tonder, recently rebranded, I believe. 6 back with 5 to play, and he won.
Yeah, Altin van der Merwe. I think he was 4 over his last 12 holes when he was totally in command. Only just turned professional, actually, and he's 28, I think. Won the African Amateur, looked like he was about to win a significant tournament and earn himself a Challenge Tour card. And instead it went to Daniel Van Tonder. As you said, his career has taken off since he rebranded, and it made me think of, do you remember that 4-week period where Mackenzie Hughes had everybody call him Mac? And I think they even changed it on the PGA. Oh, no, I'm Mac. No, you're not Mac, you're Mackenzie. Change it back. Which he did. But yeah, Van Tonder, a new dad, by the way, so a nice little nappy factor one. But let's face it, he was handed it really by a player who presumably knew, and this is a point I think worth making about the Challenge Tour now, the hotelplanners.org tour or whatever it is. I presumably was thinking about the fact that for a South African player now, it's such a big opportunity. They get these 3 or 4 tournaments in South Africa that are co-sanctioned, so only half the Challenge Tour membership is there. And if you can win one, that's your Challenge Tour card. You're immediately in the top 10 of the Road to Mallorca, so you're probably a couple more. If you won back-to-back events, you've probably done just about enough to get your DP World Tour card from not even having a Challenge Hotel Planner card. So yeah, I wanted to mention just a couple of players from that leaderboard, if I may. There was Liam Nolan, who is a fairly recently turned professional, won the Brabazon Trophy last year. He was playing on an invite, so he gets in via a top 10 to next week. So again, we're talking about Joe Dean and how careers can change on such things. He'll be on the Alps Tour this year unless he goes and does it again this week. Bard Scogan, I think I've said that right, big Shakespeare fan. He came out of Texas Tech, good amateur, very, very good start to the year. And I think that was it. Oh, David Law, he's a class act at that level.
Yes.
I will go on record as say, notwithstanding injuries or life events that we, can't plan for, he will have no trouble getting his card back.
Yes, I would agree with that. We should briefly mention TGL. So last week, New York Golf Club were in action again against Atlanta Drive, and unfortunately, they were at the hands of another loss, and they didn't even get a point on the board. So it's been a rough start to the year for New York Golf Club. And actually, a friend of mine, having listened to the pod last week, said thank you for the tip on Atlanta Drive, and he'd actually put some money at 8 to 11. I think
we have become the first TGL gambling podcast. Well done, Sam. Well done.
And look, I'm certainly not going to be anyone I'm not going to put anyone off having a bet this week at 8 to 13 on due to links to get beaten again. But
Rory's playing Tiger tonight on Monday night. If you listen to this
Absolutely.
after Monday, go and watch the highlights if you must. But Rory versus Tiger. It will be. We got told off in the comments for talking too much about TGL, not enough about Torrey Pines last week. However, just to round it off, it will be interesting to see what tonight does for the audience figures. Right, you've got Tiger versus Rory. It's on a Monday night instead of it's usually Tuesday, isn't it? Right, so they've brought
normally
it
Tuesday, yeah.
Presumably because Rory McIlroy has an actual golf tournament to play this week.
Possibly.
So yeah, Tiger Rory match 1. I might even watch it.
Really? You're not going to stay up?
No,
11:30 UK time.
Watch it over breakfast.
Right. Yeah. I mean, you see it as Tiger versus Rory. I personally see it as Kisner against Keegan Bradley. But
Sure. Can Kisner make an impression on Keegan that will see him join Harris English in that Ryder Cup side? I hope so.
On to news in the world of golf, and I think it's been a reasonably quiet week. There hasn't been a whole lot. I mean, there's been a lot of sort of talk about slow play, which is kind of a hangover really from last week. There's Rick Shiels signing with Liv. Obviously, it's not really sort of tour related per se in what he's going to be doing.
Yeah,
but
it's not a real golf tour. Well said, Sam. Well said. That was you who said that, wasn't even me.
Any thoughts on whether that's a good move for either party?
I couldn't care less. No, I shouldn't be flippant about it. I don't know what to say. I don't know Rick Shiels. I've seen one video of his. It was a fairly softball interview with that Andy Gardner, was it, of the PGL when that was taking off.
Oh yes, PGL, yeah.
But he's got a massive following. He must have worked really hard to get it. And now he's decided to. I I don't want to say cash in because that sounds derogatory. It's not for me to judge him. I don't know him. But clearly he has, he will have made a lot of money out of this.
I'd imagine so.
It sounds like he might have to row back on a few of his opinions, but it won't be anything like as egregious as John Rahm saying it was a joke and 54 holes isn't a proper golf tournament and now pretending it is. So, if we're not going to carry on talking about that, then I don't think we should lose much sleep over what Rick Shiels does. And of John Rahm, he has apparently borrowed his jacket, and I have to say, it's a horrible jacket. It is a truly horrible jacket. But
I mean, is it better or worse than the Cleeks bag?
The Cleeks bag, I'm glad you brought that up. How did my tweet from Tom Wanscan saying it's a ludicrously capacious bag not go viral? The best ones never do. The best ones truly never do. I think my most viral tweet ever was when I said Tommy Fleetwood and Francesco Molinari should win Team of the Year at Sports Personality. The most banal opinion, engagement farming claptrap as I was high on the 2018 Ryder Cup. And I got 3,000 likes. They were talking about me in Naples and everything. But you do one about Tom Wanscans and you get 4 likes from other people who are up at 6:30 watching Bluey or whatever it was. Timing is everything, isn't it?
Yeah, the algo. I mean, you can predict it nowadays.
Yeah, it's absolutely shafted me, I'll be honest.
The Irish Open, Rory confirmed to be playing that at K Club. That came out. That's notable. I mean, I suppose it's no great surprise. I mean, he typically plays it.
It does allow me to talk about a personal bugbear of mine when people say this man has not done enough to support the Irish Open. When he won it at the K Club, he gave all the money via his foundation to local charities. He's done amazing things for golf in Ireland, north and south of the border, and news that he's playing is not a surprise. It will make sure it's a sellout, and obviously after last year when he probably should have won it, he'll be determined. At the K Club, you do well to beat him, I would have thought.
Yeah, agreed. On to more sort of current golf. Let's go through what's happening this week, and we'll start with the sort of
busy, isn't it? Busy.
It's a very busy one. We'll start with the sort of the lower events, if you like. The Corn Ferry Tour is heading to Panama, the Panama Championship. We've got the Hotel Planner Tour, staying in South Africa at the My Golf Life Open.
To confirm, that event is the hotelplanner.com Challenge Tour My Golf Life Open. Is that the full?
I believe that's correct.
Excellent.
Yes. We've got the LPGA Tour kicking off this week at the HGV Tournament of Champions, which is at Lake Nona.
You've played Lake Nona. I know this about you.
I have played Lake Nona.
Just briefly, what's the best golf course you've played ever?
I think it's got to be North Berwick.
Oh, that's a pretty good one. Yeah, mine's like the Berkshire, so I'm liking it. Lovely
nice.
golf course. Lovely.
Is that the red or the blue?
I don't know.
Oh, come on.
No, because they oversubscribed like a pro-am, and I was there they'd called our team or whatever, it was like Sky Sports, and I think people expected Ian Wright and Paul Merson to turn up, and it's me and a bloke from the tech team. So we were shuffled off. They oversubscribed the main course, and obviously they weren't going to tell Harry Redknapp, sorry mate, you got to tee off on the other one. But I was one of 3 groups that played the other course, and then they didn't do any adjustment. It was like effectively having a golf tournament across the north-south course and the south course at Torrey Pines, and not making both sides of the draw play both courses. So we played the easy course, played terribly, and came third. I got a driver. It was great. Anyway,
I always thought they were kind of on a par, the red and the blue course there. I thought they were both supposed to be very good. I don't know. I only played one.
It was an excellent golf course, and we were very well treated. But it just the 3 or 4 teams that played the blue course came first, third, fifth, and sixth. So something's going on there.
It does feel like an oversight there, really, to not factor that in. But yeah,
agreed.
I mean, Lake Nona is definitely up there. It's definitely in the top 5 that I've played without a doubt. But I did probably also shoot about 120. I didn't play particularly well that day. I had higher clubs, which doesn't help. I'm not going to blame it on that, of course. Mainly, I'm just not a very good golfer, but it was good fun, and I did play the Ben Ann song in the clubhouse later on. I've got a grand piano in the clubhouse, and it was filmed, and that led to the putting match against Ben Ann at Pirates Cove later that week. So it was a cool experience.
Where's Pirates Cove on you? Is that in at number 7 or something?
Yeah, just below Lake Nona. Yeah.
Fine. Good.
Moving on to other events this week, we've got the Asian Tour, International Series Asian Tour at DLF, which is a fantastically wacky golf course. And we
Is that wacky? You said wacky, did you?
Wacky, yes.
Sure, yeah, good.
And we've got Bryson. Bryson is in the field amongst other interesting names. I believe you got a story about Gary Player that you wanted to share.
Yeah, I don't know. We haven't really got time, but I'm going to do it anyway. So I wrote about the Indian Open, the Hero Indian Open, as it was a few years ago when they first went to DLF. And let's face it, the golf course is ridiculous. It is truly a ridiculous golf course. And that's fine. I'm okay. I think I've come around to the idea that ridiculous golf courses do exist. It's fine. It's okay to have ones that are maybe a bit more expensive, even if I sometimes feel like we shoot ourselves in the foot a bit. But like, this is a golf course for, you said you shot 100 and whatever it was around Lake Nona. I mean, around this place, if you'd have played to the same standard, you'd have given up. You'd have walked off the golf course. There are so many ridiculous aspects to the course, including bunkers that face the wrong way. Anyway, I put this in my preview, and I got a message, if I may read it, from Player Design. Mr. Coley, after reading your negative article regarding the Indian Open at DLF Golf and Country Club, it is apparent that you prefer more traditional style courses, and that is certainly personal preference you're fully entitled to. Now, despite saying I'm fully entitled to it, they continue. What surprises us is that you're trying to compare DLF to St Andrews, Augusta National, Royal Melbourne, and alike. DLF is an innovative, thought-provoking, and unique golf experience that is impossible to compare with other traditional style courses. Nevertheless, they're about to compare it. It did produce a champion who didn't overpower the course. Rather, SSP Chaurasia played smartly, utilised course management to his advantage, and had an impeccable short game. Ironically, it's not ironic, very similar tactics to success over other national championships / major tournament venues. It goes on to include that many players were complimentary. Some compared it to Augusta National conditions. Now, I went back and looked at the leaderboard, and I believe there were 3 players in the field who had ever played in the Masters. So I think what we have ascertained from this is that basically Emiliano Grillo quite liked it. It then said the course produced birdies, eagles, double eagles, and even a hole-in-one.
They lost me a double eagle, to be honest.
Oh, totally. Totally. Then they said that scoring was comparable to the 2013 Open Championship, and therefore this course is comparable with Muirfield. Said it didn't suit everybody. Yeah. Mr. Coley, you may not like the design nor the name, correct, of DLF Golf and Country Club, but you cannot dispute, I have disputed it, the venue was exceptional. In future, and so it goes on.
Wow.
It was not signed by Mr. Player. However, to me, I do consider that I have received a direct message from Gary Player, which is great, isn't it? Yeah,
You definitely read it out in his voice when you were reading it in your head, I'm sure.
100%. Yeah, it should. If it had said P.S., you don't eat enough vegetables or do enough sit-ups, both of which are true, I would have known it was from his hand. But yes, that was a message I received. 8 years ago now. 8 years ago. Yeah.
So I take it from that you'll be tuning into the Asian Tour this week.
To be honest, it might be worth it seeing Bryson DeChambeau shoot 82 around there. Yeah, that would make for some good YouTube content. Obviously, he's favourite and may well win because he's very, very good at golf. But I think if you could build a course to push Bryson to breaking point, basically, if they've flown in some fire ants, he's going to lose it. So, fingers crossed.
We've already talked about the fact that TGL is on tonight, and then so we lead to the 2 big events this week, or in my mind the bigger events. So PGA Tour is a Pebble Beach signature event, no cut, personally not a massive fan of, but no cut event. You got, I think the big sort of headlines, you got Scheffler and Spieth making their first starts of the season, Spieth following wrist surgery, Scheffler following hand surgery. What are your expectations of them both this week and also over the course of the season?
It's difficult to answer that, isn't it? Scheffler would get a good indication. I saw somebody, I can't remember who it was, sort of a professional golfer saying that, was it Pearson Coody? It might have been, saying that they had a problem with their hand. And then it just, after they had surgery or whatever, just stitches or whatever it had been, holding the golf club just felt completely different. And it is a real area of uncertainty regarding Scheffler, isn't it? Like, it's obviously not a serious injury he's had. He's back a month. It's a month since he did it. By the way, he's making pasta on Christmas Day, which is a ridiculous thing in and of itself. But anyway, He, who knows? I mean, I certainly don't think we should, if he does not play particularly well, we shouldn't rush to judgment because it's been a long time since he played competitively anyway. Mid-December, wasn't it, when he won the Hero? So what will be will be, but that's interesting. I think with Spieth, that sort of excites me a bit more because there's potential. He's got a big gap between where he is currently and where he has been, and the idea that he might begin to narrow that gap is exciting for the reasons you've mentioned already. I put him up for the Open at 66-1. I don't know if you might get a bit of 50 still. I think even if there wasn't potential for him to close that gap, it'd be a big price. But what's interesting about him last year is that he drove the ball really well at times, and his iron play wasn't good. And this may be putting 2 and 2 together and making 5. But if you've got a problem in your wrist that you're just aware of, irons are going to be where it really is a problem because you're hitting into the turf. There's a high impact there, whereas off a tee peg and chipping and putting, it maybe isn't such a big deal. So if he can,
that's a good point. Yeah,
if he can get his iron play back, Sam, I mean, based on last year's driving numbers, would be very interesting. I
honestly would very much love to see Spieth firstly win this year just on the PGA Tour or win a major. I think it would be great. I think he's fascinating to watch, and he's clearly his ceiling is extremely high, obviously, and it just feels like the last couple of years are just largely due to injury, or at least last year it's certainly due to injury. It's just he struggled, and it's sad to see really because he's
I mean, but even in 2021 when he did come back, that sort of where it first felt like he came back, he contended for the Open, didn't he, at Royal St George's? I think he was a fairly short price going into the final day. And he's obviously had a couple of chances at the Masters, even, post slump, if you like. The thing he's not done really since 2017, which is a long time ago, is beat a world-class field. Unless I'm missing something. I'm sure, he's obviously won in Texas where he beat Matt Wallace and Charlie Hoffman, maybe, I think. But
he was very close to the Heritage, wasn't he? Obviously, when he was in the playoff with Fitzpatrick, and that would have been a strong field, wouldn't it?
That's right. It would have been that was elevated or designated, whatever it was at the time. Yeah. But we'll see. There's there are loads of unknowns there, but there's potential for him to really begin to climb back up. It's a bit of a baptism of fire in some respects because this is a very strong field. At the same time, Pebble Beach is a course he absolutely loves, and this is a tournament he loves. So it'll be interesting to see how he gets on. And look. Scheffler and McIlroy are going to head to betting, obviously. Scheffler's back from surgery and McIlroy's seldom played Pebble Beach. It's not the worst week. He was awful here last year as well. It's not the worst week to take them on. Whether with Spieth, I mean, there'll be loads of risk there and it'll be a big price. But from a betting point of view, it's probably the signature event with the biggest opportunity this year because, Scheffler won most of them last year. McIlroy won at Quail Hollow. And when they get into the swing of the season, they'll be very hard to beat. But this week, maybe not. Maybe.
I think you've got the fact that it's right at the beginning of the season for a lot of them. You've got the fact that the weather. I haven't actually looked at the forecast this week, but obviously it can be a little bit unpredictable. Wind obviously makes a big difference to the number of players who are likely to contend or rules out certain players. Couple of outsiders now. I'm not. It all depends on price and ultimately it's a strong field, so it's going to be hard for an outsider to break through. But like you said, it's probably the signature event that's most likely to happen. Couple to call out. Mark Hubbard, lovely progressive course form here, and he proposed to his wife on the 18th green. He's gone 33rd.
She said yes, I take it, because if she said no, that's a terrible reason to expect him to play well. I'm assuming she said his way down the 18th fairway. She must have said yes.
I mean, it would be strong, wouldn't it, to say no? I think in that situation, you just say yes at that point, and then later on you say, actually, sorry, it's a no.
Yeah, I just didn't want to. Said yes. There was a crowd, and yeah.
And the other one to call out, Denny McCarthy. I think this is the type of event where, he shot a closing 64 2 years ago. You don't have to be a big hitter to contend at Pebble Beach. So, yeah, just another one to throw out. But I think probably my main fancy would be Justin Thomas. He was second in tee to green last year. He's been playing pretty well the last few weeks. I think he is on the brink of winning again.
Almost feels inevitable, doesn't it? I think there are 3 players here who are sort of right. You could probably include Ludwig, but without getting into his effort last week, brutal to watch. But obviously he was feeling really, really unwell. But Cantlay, Morikawa and Justin Thomas will be the next three in the betting behind McIlroy and Scheffler. And for all of them, Thomas hasn't won since 2022 at Southern Hills. Morikawa, as we've discussed in earlier episodes, won the Zozo and nothing else since the 2021 DP World Tour Championship. And Cantlay, what would it have been, the FedEx Cup of 2022 as well? So they're three players, and they all three of them should see, and particularly I actually think Cantlay and Morikawa, this sort of next 3 weeks could set up the year for them, because who would be surprised if any one of those won a major this year? But laying the foundations feels important. And as I said, with Scheffler back from surgery and McIlroy probably not especially well suited to this, and let's face it, he wasn't at his absolute best in Dubai. He's still very good, but not at his best. It could be a really good chance to lay the foundations for a really big season.
Absolutely, yeah. And of course, the last tournament to mention that's happening this week, which we will cover in detail shortly, is the Bahrain Championship for the second year, I believe. Last year was the first, wasn't it? And of course, both of our players of our player tracker are in the field. So Angel Ayora and Elvis Smylie. Let's discuss how they got on last week. It was quite different. Obviously, I didn't put Smylie in my fantasy team. I thought I'd hold off for tournaments I think would be better suited to him, and he missed the cut comfortably. Ayora was pretty good actually. At one point, I thought he was going to finish better than he did in the end. But yeah, it was a solid showing.
Yeah, and confirm that he's going to be one of the strongest drivers of a ball on the DP World Tour, and therefore, if you can pinpoint the events where that will help, that's a really good start. I think this week you look at. I remember this tournament from last year, and without being rude to Mr. Fratelli, a worthy winner. It felt like for most of the week he had no clue where his drives were going, and yet he was statistically, in terms of strokes gained, I think he ranked 6th off the tee or 7th, something like that. And that immediately sort of piqued my interest. And then you look closer, and that is basically everybody in the mix drove it all over the place, still gained strokes significantly, and all the best drivers were thereabouts. And they were the best drivers despite hitting 40% of fairways, some of them. It's very similar to Alejandro in that regard. Like Del Rey last week, we could see someone do the same thing. I think it could be a good event for Ayora, actually. And the one other thing I wanted to say about last week, I think there were 2 players in the top 15 who were making their seasonal reappearance. He'd have been one of them, and Hamish Brown, who's made a really impressive start to life as a DP World Tour player, he would have been the other. Everybody else had played in Dubai. So all of those players now have got rid of that disadvantage in theory, and they also come to a course which is not established. As you said, they only came back here last year. There'd be players like Ross Fisher who played it 15 years ago, but essentially it's almost new to everybody. So for the Challenge Tour graduates, don't be surprised if we see another step up from some of them.
Yeah, definitely. And I think that leads nicely onto fantasy picks generally. And
how are you doing, Sam?
I'm not doing very well, Ben. I'll be honest. We've got 99 people in our league. So, firstly, can someone join the league so we have 100? Because I think that'd be nice. Ben will say the details in a minute. But yes, I'm 92nd out of 99, and you're 13th. So I've got a bit of work to do. Clearly, my being adventurous with the picks thing isn't really working out. But I'm probably just going to keep doing it.
It's probably gained you a measure of respect, which I have lost in going for all of the favourites. So you can console yourself with that. You said I'm going to read out details. Go to the DP World Tour website, click on My Games. You have to log in, and you go to the DP World Tour Fantasy League. If you enter the invite code S460TR1D, you'll be in our league. Simple as that. And you'll be very, very welcome as well. And
you'll probably beat me.
Possibly. I mean, you've not got much of a ground to make up on you. So,
No.
Yeah, we'll see. Who are you going for this week? Anyway, who you got?
This week, well, Ayora is definitely in my team based on how well he played last week and the fact that it's just going to suit him, isn't it? Let's be honest. And he's just a very good player. Rory Cantor, I just think he's kind of a cut above a lot of this field, and it feels like another win is probably going to happen this year. Big fan of his. The other ones have got a bit more sort of. I'm looking at last week as being a good pointer. I mean, I think you alluded to this a minute ago, but similar type of game I think will reward players. And I actually looked at last year's leaderboard. You got Højgaard, who came second. We were second at Ras Al Khaimah. He was 8th in Bahrain. Lacroix 3rd, and then he was 4th in Bahrain. Soderberg 9th, and then 6th in Bahrain. Lombard 13th, 2nd in Bahrain. Gerbach 20th, and then 8th. So you've got, there's a very strong correlation there. So for my other 4 picks, I am very much looking at players who did well last week. Johannes Veerman, he's obviously stepped up his game recently, won at Nedbank. He was 16th last week. Ugo Cuso, he was 12th in this event last year, 16th last week. Again, he feels like someone who's going to win at some point soon. Scott Jameson, this is slightly more out of the box, but he played very well last week, and he's someone I just think he could just peak in this type of field. And then lastly, Cantero, and we've talked a lot about talented Spanish players. He's someone who, for large periods of the last couple of years, he's gone through big strings of missed cuts, but he seems to have suddenly found something, or at least the last few weeks. I think the last 6 weeks he's been in the top 35 or something like that. And he'd had 5 missed cuts on the spin before last year's event in Bahrain, which he missed a cut. But so I'm writing that off as being, he was just in bad form at the time. He's found a new level of consistency to his game. So those are my 6. What about you, Ben?
Yeah, and he drives the ball really, really well. He's a massive hitter. Him and Del Rey, there's nothing of them really. They'd be about my height, and I am not a tall man. And they hit the ball miles and miles. So Cantero, I've tipped in the last 2 weeks in Dubai at sort of 500 to 1 when he played well, really, better than his price would have suggested. And then last week at 150 to 1 where he finished, I think, 5th. And he was great. He's got a lot of talent. If you go back, he was a very good amateur, and it's just taken him a while. He's not done what Del Rey's done and won at every step. But I think you're on the right lines with him. It's a really good golf course. So, my selections, if you would like them,
Yes.
Angel Ayora, who is probably going to be my El Capitan. That means captain in Spanish. I'm going to go with David Puig. Who again placed for me last week, finished 3rd. He's just a fabulous ball striker. I think it's a real shame where he plays his golf, I'll be honest with you, but there we are. To Bjorn Olesen, he now, as we revealed last week, we do now realise we get a limited number of opportunities to select each player, but at some point, presumably Torbjorn is going to go to America and play on the PGA Tour because he earned a card at the back end of last year through the race to Dubai. And he's a fantastic desert golfer. David Micheluzzi, he was 7 under through 14 in the final round here last year and then dropped 3 shots over the last 4 holes. He returns in better form, more established. He has, along with your man Elvis, actually, I think he's probably got one of the best short games on tour, and he's long enough. He's not a massive hitter, but he's above average. And probably the other thing here, I don't think it's necessarily said enough that when you've got sort of drivable par 4s, of which there are 2, sort of 1.5. The 10th and the 11th can both be drivable, the 10th in particular. But also 4 par 5s. Like the greens hit percentage in 2 on a par 5 is still, for the most part, quite low. And generally, to get your birdie, it's a chip and a putt. And I think we saw that last year with Dylan Fratelli. Like he was just chipping it to 3 and 4 feet. And the difference between doing that and chipping it to 8 and 10 feet over the course of a week, if you've got 24 holes like that, or even 30 holes like that, it can be important. And I think we saw it last week, so I'm going on too much here, but Alejandro Del Rey and Marcus Armitage were the top 2 in the field around the greens, so they're picking up those cheap birdies where others weren't. David Micheluzzi will do that all day and all night. He's just a fabulous chipper and putter.
Interesting thing to say about David Micheluzzi. You talked about the fact that when I do my sort of at the beginning of each season, I say, okay, give me a name outside the top 100 in the world who you think is going to do well. Cameron Percy, obviously very accomplished golfer, now playing on the Champions Tour. He replied to that and he said Micheluzzi. He said, he's obviously a big fan of his game. So, I always find it interesting when other pros kind of mention people, because I kind of think they probably see something different that you and I probably can't see. So
definitely, it's a shame Cameron Percy won't listen to the podcast, given my views on the Champions Tour. But there we are. Sam Bairstow is next. He had a
Oh, I
really
love
poor first round last week, played great thereafter. This tournament last year was the first time he really contended on the DP World Tour. And you mentioned Alhambra as a really good place to go looking for form clues. I agree with you. The other place I'd say is Singapore. Jesper Svensson won in Singapore. Ockie Strydom the year before, and he's been in the mix. He was in the mix in Bahrain as well. Immediately when you see Ockie Strydom, like he's not played very well at many courses, so that sort of piqued my interest. But it's definitely a golf course in Singapore where you've got a big advantage for having those extra yards that Jesper Svensson has. Sam Bairstow played really well there as well. And finally, I'm going to throw in Patrick Reed. I think basically there are two types of player I was looking for. Ideally, you find the same player who fits both of these, but either a massive hitter or someone with really good hands around the greens. And Patrick Reed, obviously in the latter category. He'll play 5 or 6 times on the DP World Tour this year, so I might as well include him when I can. I know I'm not as speculative as you, but he's in there as number 6.
I think you're playing this probably more sensibly than me in the.
I'm trying to win. Yeah,
that...
you're being in some ways disrespectful to the competition.
Well, I think it's more that you've sort of looked at players' likely schedules and you've decided, okay, Ollison's going to go to America. Patrick Reed is going to be, not going to be playing many more events. Whereas I've just been like, I quite like their chances, which probably speaks a lot to the fact that you're 13th and I'm 92nd. But
it's a long way left, a long way. And if Scott Jameson wins this week, you'll be laughing, won't you? So
exactly. I'll probably end up with 4 missed cuts like I did last week. But anyway, on to highest bidder. Now we've received a few submissions for this. So I'm going to try and do them in order. So I think that's the fairest way to do. And this one comes from Eat and Sleep Golf. And the topic is, if you're ready, Ben. Potential question for you. Since the start of 2000,
that's
11 players.
Well done.
Yeah, very good. 11 players have won the same major championship on at least 2 occasions. How many can you name?
Okay,
At least
I'll write a number down. Yeah.
11 players have won the same major championship on at least 2 occasions.
Right. Have you got a number? I've got a number.
Yeah, I have. Let's hold it up.
I've got 6. I'm going to have to do the countdown thing. My
countdown thing.
My bid was 6.
I believe you, Ben.
But it's written on the instructions for this charming light that you can put in your baby's room, and it will help them sleep. But if you go closer, that's a number 6. Definitely not a 9.
No, 6. So Ben has gone 6. I've gone 5. So Ben, that means you get to go. You have 2 minutes.
2 minutes, right. So the same major more than twice since 2000.
Yeah.
Okay. Tiger Woods.
Yeah.
Phil Mickelson.
Yeah. Are you going to call out the majors, or?
I don't believe I'm required to do that, Sam. Brooks.
Be nice for our listeners.
Well, Tiger Woods, the Masters and the Open since 2000, yeah. Mickelson, the Masters. Brooks Koepka, is it the PGA? He's won 3 times. It is, isn't it? Yeah. So that's that. I'm in a bit of bother now, I'll be honest with you, because that's 3. You said there are 11 players who've done this.
I'm surprised there's as many as 11. I think I can think of 2 more, but I'm sure you've got another.
They've got to have won the tournament 3 or more times.
2
or more.
2 or more.
They've only got to have won the same tournament twice or more.
Yes.
Okay, well, Rory McIlroy, the PGA Championship. Okay, that's good. Okay, Brooks Koepka, the US Open. Surely I get to say him twice. Right?
Do you get to say him twice? I don't know.
Come on. It'd be bad for future relations on this podcast if I don't. So that's 5. And now I've got to find one other golfer who's won the same major more than once, correct?
Since 2000, yep.
Oh, Scotty Scheffler. He's won the Masters twice, hasn't he?
Yes.
So that's good. Yeah. So I think I've done it. I'm going to try and think of another. That is 6, but if Brooks Koepka doesn't count having achieved the feat more than once, I should probably try and think of another.
Well, the question as it was phrased was that 11 players have done it.
Bubba Watson. Masters,
yeah, there you go.
Twice.
That's the one I had waiting in my pocket. That one, but there you go. You've got your 6. I think I went a bit too low on that one. I think maybe I. Not that I can think of.
When I thought you were saying 3 or more, and there aren't 11. So why I was, I'm pleased to have done it. I'm trying to think of more now. Angel Cabrera won the Masters in the US Open, so not him.
Not him. There you go, Ben. You're up to 12 points. and
Thank
I'm on
you.
1.
Oh,
so.
Padraig Harrington won the
Oh,
Open
Harrington,
twice.
yes, of course.
Yeah.
There've got to be others, haven't there?
Phil's won more than one PGA Championship, right? So, Phil.
Yeah, but then again, you already said him for Masters, so.
Well, we'll have to consult Eat and Sleep Golf to find out whether there are 11 instances or 11 people who've done it, and therefore.
Yeah.
But anyway, doesn't really matter. I get my 5
It was an
points.
addendum, actually, so won the same major championship. No. Yeah. A bonus question in that time, which 3 guys have achieved it at more than one major? Oh, I don't know. I think we've done the main topic.
You've awarded
it was a good one.
That's
it was
fine.
a good one.
So, good category that. Send them into what's our social again, Sam?
Sliced Pod. So Sliced Pod on Twitter. I think it'd be a DM to Sliced Pod would be ideal, just because that way we can kind of ignore it until we need it. Whereas if you put it through on a reply to something, then I'm going to see it, and then it's just going to play on my mind for a week, and I obviously would have an unfair advantage, or one of us would. So, but yes, thank you. Please do keep them coming. We do enjoy them,
and keep liking, star ratings, reviews, all that. We've got loads of ratings on Spotify, which is fantastic. Great. So thank you to everybody. I think we're close to 50 5-star ratings, which is amazing. So thank you. We need more on iTunes, Apple Podcasts, whatever you call it. I'm sure there are other places you can review us. Actual written reviews are great as well. And on Spotify, you can leave comments on episodes. So if you've got a question, if you like last week's commenter, we're not happy with the amount of time given to the TGL, absolutely fine. Please send feedback. If there's something you want us to add to the podcast, a talking point. Someone did say we should have a nugget from the previous week that caught our eye. We can try and incorporate that in the future as well. So there's loads of things we consider doing, all within our hour. And we've got 4 minutes to go, Sam. I'm very relaxed, apart from the fact you may have caught my baby crying a minute ago, so sorry about that.
I didn't hear that personally. Our listeners may have done, but I might have been just too focused on highest bidder. But I think the other thing to note before we wrap up is the fact that I don't think we're going to reveal the names at this stage, but we have got 2, I think, significant guests coming on over the course of the next couple of months. One of which is a DP World Tour winner, a recent DP World Tour winner, and the other of which is a Ryder Cup, former Ryder Cup captain and a sort of legend of the game. So,
and there's no like, you can't have a duff Ryder Cup captain. There's no, like, it can't be underwhelming, can it? It's a Ryder Cup captain. So it's great. Looking forward to it. We've got 2 interviews lined up. We'll do more of those. Some people have said more interviews. So we try and do 1 a month or something like that. We'll see what we can do. But yes, I'm very excited about both of those. Not as excited as I am about next week's highest bidder, but
Why? Do you already know the topic?
No, I just like playing.
You just like winning,
where I get to think about golf, and opportunities to do so are few and far between.
Well, this is true. Well, thank you very much for joining this week. We will, of course, be back next Monday. Enjoy your weeks.